So a lot of you will recognize this bike. This is my 76 CB550 that I built on the channel. I'll throw a playlist up here if you haven't seen it. I called it the Barn to Brat project. We are getting this thing ready to go. It's actually sold. I already have the deposit down for it. There's just a few last minute things I want to kind of tweak and fix and get it perfect before the new owner kind of takes delivery. One of those is going to be rebuilding this master cylinder because it has great pressure, but we're getting a little bit of brake fluid kind of seeping out of the seals. So we're going to pull that off and show you guys what is involved in actually rebuilding and replacing the internals of one of these. So the first thing we're going to do is pull this cap off. I went ahead and threw some gloves on. Brake fluid is very corrosive, so also make sure you don't get it on any of your painted surfaces or anything. If you do, make sure to clean it off immediately. I am going to use a small, I guess it's not so small, a syringe. I'll throw a link to this one. It's off Amazon for a couple of bucks to suck out any of the remaining brake fluid in our reservoir here. The idea behind this is when I go to pull this off, I won't have a ton of brake fluid kind of, dripping all over everything. Now that we got the reservoir emptied, I'm going to take a 14mm wrench, pull this back, and just loosen my banjo fitting. That way, when we go to pull this off, it'll be easier to get that nut off. So now it's just going to be two 10mm bolts from this front side. You can pull this whole thing forward. Now we can reach over here to this banjo bolt and unscrew it the rest of the way. Now we're over here on the bench. To remove the lever, there's just a 10mm lock nut on the bottom. 10mm through the top. Should be able to pull the lever off. Then we'll have access to get into our plunger. So I have my rebuild kit all laid out. So I have all the pieces ready to go. This particular kit is from a company I use all the time. It's called 4into1.com. I will throw a link. They do sell this through Amazon, so I'll throw a link to this in the description. I think it's a little over 20 bucks, maybe $24, something like that. Really good deal, really high quality rebuild kit. So we're going to start to pull the master cylinder apart. First thing we're going to do is get some needle nose pliers, and we're going to be pulling out this seal that's right around the end of the plunger here. Just pops right out. We're going to keep all the old parts over on this side. Now that we got this seal out, there is a small metal clip. Even the rebuild kit comes with a new one, this little silver one right here. Now that we got that out, it's time for the snap ring. So this is what a snap ring looks like. I know it's going to be hard to see against my black gloves, but basically it's like almost a full circle, and there's little holes on each side. They do make snap ring pliers. This is such a tight tolerance in here that I actually don't even have a pair of snap ring pliers that will go all the way down in there. So if you're messing around for a little bit, the best technique I found is you can kind of move the snap ring around until the two holes are kind of in this open area. Then you use a 90-degree pick, go in there and push in, and that lets you kind of unseat the snap ring, and then you can just kind of work it around. Now keep in mind, this plunger does have a spring behind it, so kind of put your finger on it. It shouldn't really shoot out, but there is a spring in there. So now that the snap ring is out, we can pull our plunger. There's like a little washer on it, and the beauty of this rebuild kit is it replaces all of this stuff. So the seal pretty dry. That's what the plunger looks like when it's out. Not too bad. Now there's a little kind of rubber cup in here. This little guy right here, if you can see it. So we'll want to reach in there with one of these picks and try and get that guy out too, since we have a replacement. And then we get that guy out, you'll see the spring that I was talking about right there. So there's a spring, little cup at the end of the spring, and then that is the whole assembly. You can actually see all the way through to the line now. So nothing more to pull off. So I'm going to go ahead and throw this in my parts washer just to get the kind of residual brake fluid off of it, and then I'll bring you guys back and we will start reassembly. Master cylinder is all nice and clean. This is where if you had any kind of rust or buildup or deposits or anything, you want to make sure that these two little passageways are clean. You can just take some brake parts cleaner with a little hose and kind of blast it through there, and just make sure this thing is nice and clean. All the threads are in good shape. There's no kind of heavy corrosion or anything that's causing your leaks, and it is in fact just kind of old seals. Now, to go back together, we have our spring. We have that little cup thing I was talking about that goes on the end of the spring like that. That's the first thing that's going to go down into the master cylinder, back where everything came out. Slide that down. Next is the larger kind of rubber cup that goes over and kind of encapsulates that spring. So now we're ready to install the plunger. So you put your little metal washer on here, put a little bit of the grease around this rubber seal. Ready to go right down on. And then we can push it down, and you should be able to get a nice kind of spring back on there. And we need to just make sure that that washer is going down far enough so that our snap ring groove is accessible, and it is. So this is the point where snap ring pliers do help a lot. Again, not totally necessary, but reinstallation, snap ring pliers, I can put them in this little hole, and I can kind of compress it, push one thing down with my thumb, and I can get them really close. But again, because these snap ring pliers are a little bit too fat, I have to finish it off with a pick. And I know that there's no way for you guys to see this, but what I'm doing is just pushing the snap ring down, just like that, until it clips into that groove we talked about. Now we can put in our final seal with the little metal ring that retains it. So basically a little top hat goes down like that, and there's a little groove on this piston. Hopefully you guys can see in there. There's a little groove on the top of that piston that this seats onto. So that goes down. You can kind of just work it around with your fingers a little bit. You may even be able to use a pick if you're careful not to poke through. And then you can just slide this little retaining ring in there, push that down with the pick as well. That just kind of goes around the bottom lip of this seal just to kind of help hold it in place. Last step before we put it back on the bike is just to reinstall our lever. So it just goes in here with a little hole. Bolt comes through the top. It does screw into the bottom. And then we just have our little lock nut with the little retaining plate. That go on the bottom. So the little retaining plate's got a little nub on it. Put that nub in there. Another 10 mil. She's ready to go back on the bike. So what I have set up here now is the little trick I'm going to show you guys. So I have brake fluid in my syringe here, and you're going to want to make sure you hold this kind of upright before you start putting it in so that the air comes up in the line. Obviously we don't want to push air into the caliper. We're going to loosen this bleed screw, and then we're going to start to put pressure on this. We don't need to put a huge amount of fluid up through the system. Basically what we're looking to do is just start to fill the reservoir from the inside. That way we know from this point all the way through the system there's no air bubbles. So we'll kind of loosen this, keep an eye on our reservoir, and just doesn't take a huge amount of pressure. I can already see some fluid starting to go into the reservoir. So I'm just going to put like, a 1/4 inch or so into the reservoir from the bottom. Then we will fill it up the rest of the way, just like normal. Now that we have a little bit of fluid up here, we can just top it off. And then now we'll give the brake a squeeze. Don't go too crazy here or it will shoot out. We're just wanting to work out any little air bubbles we might be able to that are still up here in the master cylinder. But this already has a decent amount of pressure, so I'm just going to continue to kind of work this back and forth. You know, you can start to go a little bit quicker. Again, don't give it a hard push or it will push fluid and shoot out. But we're just going to keep working it like this until we stop getting any air bubbles. So after about 15 or 20 pumps, we have a nice firm lever with no more bubbles coming out. Double check our level, maybe just add a smidge more. You definitely don't run this all the way at the top, but just a little bit more, and then we will throw on the top. Well, that's it, job done. We have a nice firm lever. If your lever is going all the way to the handlebar, then odds are you got a little bit too much air in your system and you need to do a full bleed. Not a huge deal, just a little bit more time. But that filling it from the bottom trick helps save a lot. So we'll continue to monitor this, make sure our banjo and everything else, nothing else is leaking, everything is checking out as it should, and we're ready to move on to the next project. So if you guys have any questions about this job, let me know in the comments below. I'll get to work on some more videos, and I'll see you guys soon.